Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last class for the 5th year of Love Your Alley. Tonight's talk is Native Plants 101 with Josh Zingg from Edge Effect. And I want to let you all know about Love Your Alley this year. It has a little bit of a twist. This year, we're doing something called the Bexley Habitat Triangle. Because of our community efforts over the past 5 years to restore habitat, Green Bexley's Love Your Alley secured a sizable grant from a funder named Village and Wilderness. And this grant is to restore land on 30 to 35 properties in South Bexley, and we're calling the area the Bexley Habitat Triangle. It's in the southwest quadrant of our city, and the initiative will create one large habitat for birds, bees, and butterflies. Education is tailored to the residents of the Bexley Habitat Triangle. They specifically asked for this class. And this class was actually the #1 class that residents requested. Village and Wilderness is asking us to attempt to create a model that's replicable. So because of that, we have partnered with Worthington, and the hope is that they will bring this project to their city next. So far, the Bexley Habitat Triangle, with great help from residents, Love Your Alley committee members, native landscapers. This winter, we removed invasive honeysuckle from 17 yards. The honeysuckle lined College Avenue. It was quite a beautiful sight to see that honeysuckle torn down. It was wonderful. And then in April, again, with landscapers and residents and volunteers, we did site prep. So we went to each yard and we prepped the yards for gardens. And then in May, I don't remember how many days ago now, it's all starting to blur together, we actually started installing plants. With the help of student volunteers, packs and troops, the gardens started to be installed. So far we've worked with Columbus School for Girls and St. Charles. This weekend we'll work with Bexley High School, and in a few weeks we're going to be working with a Brownie troop, about 28 and 9-year-old girls. We're also looking for more volunteers for this weekend. We could use more hands if anybody's available. We'd be very happy to have your help on Saturday the 17th and Sunday the 18th between the hours of 10 and 4. If you're interested, please find me and I'll help get you set up to volunteer. I'd really appreciate your help. On May 4th, we distributed lots and lots of plants, 950 plants and 50 shrubs to the Bexley community, thanks to the Bexley Community Foundation and thanks to Franklin Soil and Water Conservation District. I want to give a huge thank you to the Love Your Alley committee who started working on Love Your Alley 2025 over a year ago. They pour a ton of work into bringing this initiative to life. So I know some of you are in the room. Can you raise your hand or stand up? So thank you for all the work that you contribute to this. It wouldn't happen without you all. I'd also like to thank Village and Wilderness, the Bexley Community Foundation, Franklin Soil and Water for their generous grants, and to the Edge Effect, the City of Bexley, Catch the Water, Newfangled Kitchen, all for their in-kind donations. Thank you to Art Makes Columbus for funding our one very special soon-to-come mural created by Susan Cowden. Okay, so Josh Zingg is a certified arborist, landscape professional, and lifelong learner. He has worked in the green industry throughout the Columbus area for 10 years and founded Edge Effect in 2025 alongside his wife, Reyna. Not a good spot for a page break. Focus on education and using the residential landscape to enhance habitat for humans and wildlife alike. A few years ago, I was lucky enough to come across a beautiful eco-rich yards that Josh created in Bexley. One of them was Judy's yard. And as soon as I saw her yard, I knew that I had to work with him just from seeing his work. I've been very fortunate to work with Josh and his wife, Reyna, in my yard on a few different gardens, and their work is transformative. I love my yard now. They help me bring to life a beautiful, purposeful yard, proposing ideas I wouldn't have thought of on my own. The first thing I do before my family wakes up in the morning is I scurry downstairs, slip on my flip-flops, hop outside to see what's new in the garden and which birds are visiting. After being awarded the Village and Wilderness Grant, I reached out to Josh to see if he'd like to be involved. He jumped right on board. He has led this initiative with an unbelievable amount of organization, an encyclopedic knowledge, a ton of hard work, and an unrivaled Zen-like passion. It is a delight to work with him, and I'm looking forward to learning from him tonight with all of you. Josh Zingg.
Thank you. Is that good? Everybody can hear me in the back? This is good. I don't usually work with a microphone. Usually I just yell. I also don't usually work with technology. Usually I'm standing under a tree, so hopefully this goes well. So yes, I'm Josh Zingg. That was a very nice introduction. Thank you so much. I'm a little blushing. So Native Plants 101. What, where, when, why, and how. This is just sort of an overview of the native plant, some of the terms that come up, just broadly conceptual, but we're also going to get into a few specific plants just as examples of the things we're talking about. So just before we start out, this is a prairie that I manage. This is in the Dublin area. This beautiful wetland wildflower meadow is actually someone's septic field. So this is a problem area that has become a really beautiful feature of their landscape, and I enjoy working here every time I go there. So it's just a great example of the sort of riot of color, texture, and form that you can have even in a place that is literally a waste space. So this is me. She gave me the introduction already, but Edge Effect, there's business cards in the back if anyone is interested. So what is a native plant? At its most basic level, a native plant species is something that is known to occur naturally within a given area. So occur naturally, meaning not introduced there, not planted there by people. And I put the historically in there because there are many plants that were once in an area that because of human development are no longer there. Quite a bit has been damaged. Wetlands in Ohio, which used to be much of Ohio, have been drained. Forests in Ohio, which would have been the rest of Ohio, have been cut and turned into farmland, and then cities and developments and things. So because a thing used to be there, it might not be there now, but we have the opportunity in the residential landscape to bring such things back. Oh, just some of the examples. Great white trillium, the state wildflower, a very delicate flower that takes quite a long time to go from seed to flower, so it requires relatively undisturbed mature woods to propagate itself, so it is threatened in a lot of places. The Ohio buckeye, state tree, the common pawpaw, largest fruit native to North America, also the state fruit. And then the sweet gum is just a tree that I love. It's the biggest tree on my property, so I have a special place in my heart, even though I have some scars on the bottoms of my bare feet from them. So, related terms to native plants. So we're understanding it's native because it was here first. It was here on its own. It evolved in a given place. Other terms that are used in the native plant community, usually either subdividing natives or contrasting introduced or exotic plants. These are the opposite. These are plants that were not from a given place but are there now. So boxwoods, they didn't come from here, but there's a bunch of them here. Daffodils, the first flower I became aware of as a child. Not from here, but I love it, and I think about it as coming from my house, because there were a bunch of them at my house, but they're not actually from here. Apples, American is apple pie. The apple tree, it's from Kazakhstan. It's not from there, but it's been here a long time. We use it, we have a special relationship with it. There's nothing really wrong with it just because it didn't come from here. Kentucky bluegrass, not from Kentucky. That's from Europe and Asia, just has that name. Fun fact, it's called bluegrass because if you don't cut it and let it get long, the seed heads are a little bit blue. We just never get to see that in a long context. Boston ivy, not from Boston. There's a theme here, so you can't trust a common name to tell you that a given thing is native to a given place. Boston ivy is from East Asia. And then, of course, the beloved hosta. They're ubiquitous. I love them, I have them, but they're also from Asia. So these are examples of plants that are introduced, but not particularly problematic, except the dying boxwoods. I picked an unsightly boxwood picture for a reason. I'm not a big fan. So naturalized is another term. So boxwoods, if you go back, are not really naturalized here because there aren't reproducing populations of boxwoods in the forest. It's a thing that requires cultivation. You have to get one and put it somewhere and then keep it alive. They don't just move around in the landscape. naturalized species have integrated themselves with the local ecosystem. So a lot of the roadside weeds that we see, a lot of the common, weeds are introduced species that have naturalized. So chicory, dandelions, everyone's least favorite lawn ornamental. I like them, but they're problematic in some places. The red and white clovers came introduced with European pasture grasses. Queen Anne's lace, that's sort of the ancestor plant to the carrot. The common plantain. These are all plants that were introduced, but because of the way they integrate with the ecology, they're just around. They don't really suppress anything. They don't really do anything terrible unless you're a lawn person. And okay, that dandelion's not great, but they don't kill the lawn. They don't harm the local ecosystem. They don't kill trees. They don't do what you want them to do, which is be a uniform green lawn, but they're not as harmful as we'll get to in some of the invasive species. So these are naturalized. They are also now a part of a reproducing population within an ecosystem. Now we get to invasives. So this is a term that everyone hears more and more because these are problems that are getting worse and worse. We did a lot of work with the Bexley habitat triangle to remove invasives, and it's just such a drop in a very large bucket. But one drop at a time, you can drain a bucket. So the calorie pear is a great example because it has very recently been added to the official naughty list. You can't even sell these anymore. They did give nurseries a few years to sell out their stock of them when they declared that they would become illegal to sell. So it's a little self-defeating, but the calorie pear is an invasive species because it makes tons and tons of these little pears that birds like robins will eat and then distribute around and they'll pop up on the roadside. So if you, at a certain time of year, if you drive on the freeway, every intersection is just ringed by all these white flowers. That's the calorie pear. There should be other things in those places, and it's a homogeneous stand of calorie pear. That is the problematic dynamic that makes it invasive. Plantain and dandelions are not going to do that. Daffodils are not going to do that. So it's the dominance of the calorie pear that causes it to be labeled an invasive. It does a bad thing, as do the rest of these. Multiflora rose was introduced on purpose because it's pretty, and for erosion control on banks and things, it's tough. It was thought at the time that the seeds of the multiflora rose would not germinate, so it wouldn't spread. The people who tested that did not test the seed having passed through a bird's digestive tract. So at that point, then it will germinate, so birds ate the seeds and it escaped, and now we deal with it in a lot of places. It's problematic because you see a lot of seeds, that's just a few on one plant. They get everywhere, they're covered in thorns, they're difficult to remove. They have a problem. Similar with the Japanese barberry. That's an ornamental variety, the purple leafed variety, so that's a cultivated plant that is still sold, that is still widely planted. That makes a lot of little berries that little birds will eat and spread around. And it doesn't reproduce in the pretty purple form, but it reproduces in the normal green form, and it fills up the understory in a lot of local woods. And it is not palatable to deer, so it wins in a competition. When a deer sees 3 shrubs and one is barberry, it's not going to eat the barberry. So the barberry is going to win. Canada thistle, not from Canada. Back to that same theme, it's from Eurasia. So this is the thistle that you get in your yards. Finches, goldfinches and things love the seeds. They visit your bird feeders, they drop them in your yard. The cycle continues. So that's another introduced problematic invasive. Burning bush, this is this is a touchy subject for some people. Some people really love their burning bushes. It also makes a little berry. Birds eat the berry and spread the same dynamic as going again and again. So the burning bush, likewise, not palatable to deer. So when it, in competition with native understory shrub species, it will win because it doesn't have the disadvantage of being periodically eaten by deer, of which we have far too many. The deer problem in Bexley is not as big as it is in some parts of Columbus. They're around, and one of the advantages of the habitat triangle was, hey, no deer. There's some stuff that we can actually really get started, and they won't get bitten down by deer. And then, I think it was the day before planting, one of the residents said, hey, did you see the deer? Showed me a picture of a deer in his backyard. That's the backyard where we're storing the as yet unplanted plants. So, okay, well, you sit out there and you yell at them, Jim. But And then another one that's very common, winter creeper euonymus. This is a plant from Japan. If you go most wooded areas, you're going to see this. It's a particularly bad example at the Park of Roses, Whetstone Park of Roses. If you walk in the wooded areas, especially in winter, they call it winter creeper because it is evergreen. You'll see it all over the ground, and you'll see it all over the trees from about this high, because this is how high a deer can eat. The deer will eat the leaves off of the bottom, and the leaves on the top will all hang around, and then when it grows up the trees, it will make berries, and the birds eat the berries, and so on. So it is planted widely as an evergreen ground cover because it's tough, it's drought tolerant, and it's evergreen. It's a living mulch. But when it is given a scaffold to grow up, it will make berries, and it will spread itself around, and it will become a problem, because evergreen ground covers aren't really a thing in this bioregion. So it is covering an area that needs to get sunlight in the early spring in order for things like spring ephemerals to germinate properly. So it's interrupting a normal life cycle by the thing we selected it for, which was to be an evergreen ground cover that you just can't kill even if you try. So it escaped our cultivation, and now it's being a big problem all over the woods, not just in cultivated areas. So another one is aggressive. So this term is often conflated with invasive. So an aggressive species in this context is a native species that may behave in a similar way to the invasive species. So it may be problematic in a local area or problematic for your desired land use. So it's not that the plant is invading, because it's a native, it belongs here, but if you want to do something with a space that that plant does not want you to do, it's going to be problematic. So we say aggressive for that because it's not an invasive species, but plants like staghorn sumac, it's a clonal colonizer. It also makes seeds and spreads by seeds, but that is functionally one plant. So over time, an individual spread root rhizomes out that popped up new little treelets, what you call them, and then another one, and another one, and another one. So that is one plant that has become an enormous space-dominating colony. Now, if you planted one of those in a small backyard and then went away for 20 years, you would come back to something like that. That's problematic. Not invasive, but problematic and aggressive. Another good example, Canada goldenrod. If you go to most meadow and field areas like High Banks or some of the other metro parks in the fall, a lot of what you'll see is this yellow goldenrod because it is very aggressive. It spreads heavily by seeds, it spreads by underground rhizomes, and it actually produces a toxin in its roots that suppresses the germination of other seeds. So it is an anti-competitive. It has an advantage for its own dominance. Not invasive, but aggressive, and it will take over an area if allowed. And the sorts of disturbances that would have once kept that in check, like periodic fires, either natural fires or intentionally set fires. Native Americans used fire intentionally to manage land and keep areas clear and manage it without having to actually go and cut trees down. That doesn't happen so much in the metro parks. So the thing that had been keeping that suppressed is less, and there's no herds of bison to trample it. So it is aggressive in a way that if you wanted a diverse meadow area, it's going to be problematic because it's going to be all goldenrod, and that's just not what we want out of that space. We want more different colors, different textures. We don't generally want a homogeneous look. So it's not that the plant is wrong, it's that it is a bad fit for the land use we want. Pokeweed is another one. So this is a common garden weed. It's native. It's kind of pretty, actually. They get almost sort of tree-sized. I've worked sometimes in the shade of pokeweeds that are so big that they cast reasonable shade. Makes a ton of berries. Birds like them, birds especially. But they get places you don't want them to be, and they're poisonous. Like, they look delicious, but they are poisonous. There are old stories about people eating poke salad where you take the leaves and you boil them and discard the water and do that 3 or 4 times and then you can eat it. But really only if you're starving do you attempt that. But it's native, but it's problematic. So we say that that's an aggressive weed and we want to suppress that generally in our landscapes. If it's an unmanaged area, let it be pokeweed. That's fine. There are lots of wildlife that will enjoy those berries, but not in your front yard. Sunchokes, this is one of my favorite edible native plants. It's a delicious root on this plant. So The plant looks like that. It's sort of sunflower family. The flower smells a little bit like chocolate. It's very pretty. The root you can eat. Tastes a little bit like potato. Fry it up with garlic and butter. It's great. When you dig those roots out, you will not get all of them. And the ones that you don't get will resprout. So if you plant sunchokes somewhere, and then you decide you don't want sunchokes there, and you dig them all out, you will not get all of them. So you will continue to have sunchokes in that area. So again, it is aggressive locally. So that, in the garden context, is local. That's all our gardens are, is this one little local area. So that can be aggressive, still native. And the last one, trumpet vine. Very important vine for hummingbirds and other nectar-consuming insects. Very aggressive. It is a strong vine. It will grow around things and get so woody that it will crush weak structures. So if you put this on a delicate pergola, it will break that pergola. Now, it might not fall down because the woody vines, you'll just have a pergola made of vines, but in the meantime, it will crush a pergola. So if it grows on your house, if it grows on your satellite dish, if it grows in a place that you don't want it to grow, it can be problematic just because of how aggressive it is, and it will pop up by seeds and it will send little root runners up. So it's a great plant. We need it. It has complex relationships with many different kinds of wildlife, but in certain places, it can be problematic. So we label it an aggressive plant, and we use them with caution. So the adage, right plant, right place, there are many places that are the right place for a trumpet vine, and then there are places that are not. So it's important to understand that and not just think, well, it's native, so I can plant it, whatever, it's fine. Okay, just be careful. So then, another hotly contested term in the native plant community is cultivars. So a cultivar is a particular type of plant that has been selected for a particular characteristic. Generally, these then are propagated via cloning. So if you get 10 different plants from 10 different nurseries that are all, say, this one is pink double delight echinacea. Those are all functionally the same plant. They were clones of each other, so they're all exactly genetically identical. And the thing that they're preserving is that double flower because of how we think it looks. We like the look of that plant, so we've selected it to keep that plant. The contrasting image here, this is another cultivar. This is Echinacea Cheyenne Spirit. So this one has just a different color of flower, but the flower shape is the same. So the structures in that flower that hold pollen and nectar, in one of them, only the petal has been altered. In the other, the nectar-bearing structures have been altered. So it may be the case that bees and butterflies and the things that need to get their little bee faces down into that flower can't do it on the one that has an altered flower shape. Whether they care that the other one is orange, it's hard to say because bees can't see red, so it might not be orange to a bee, but the flower, like, it still has nectar. And this particular one actually will come true to type. So if you let this go to seed in an area, the seedlings will come up also orange. Most cultivars don't do that. The majority, at least many if not most cultivars, don't make seed at all. They just don't make viable seed because the thing we've selected for came with some other characteristics that we didn't select for, and that generally interrupts our successful reproduction. This is an exception to that rule, so you can plant these, and then they'll go to seed, and then those seeds will come up and also be orange. Usually they come up in a reverted form back to some original. So the question is often, is it okay to plant cultivars? Well, in that question, you have to ask, what do you want out of it? What are the consequences of its distinctiveness? So another example, this is the straight species. I have a laser pointer. This is a straight species Hydrangea arborescens, our native hydrangea. You can see it covered with a variety of insects in this picture. This is the cultivar Annabelle. Big white flowers. Every one of those flowers is sterile. No pollen, no nectar, no insects. So if the only thing you require of a plant is that it look a certain way, Annabelle will do that for you. But generally, that sort of plant should also be providing nectar and pollen and services for pollinators, and Annabelle will not do that for you. There is nothing for wildlife in an Annabelle hydrangea. Not a fan personally, but people like the look. There are other varieties that look similar enough and still have nectar and still have services. So it's not that cultivars are bad or wrong, it's that you have to consider the consequences of the thing that is selected for. Another dynamic in the cultivar world is leaf color. So this is the straight species 9-bark. And this is the cultivar Diabolo. It has dark-colored leaves. It's pretty. You'll see it a lot in parking lots because it's tough, it's dark, it's interesting. The thing that makes those leaves dark color are chemicals inside the leaves called anthocyanins. Some insects, there are many, that eat 9-bark may not like the taste of those anthocyanins. So creatures that expect to eat a 9-bark will not want to eat that colored leaf. Or alternatively, if it's not the taste that bothers them, most creatures that would live on this 9-bark and eat its leaves are probably green. So a green caterpillar on a dark purple burgundy leaf is going to be really obvious to birds. That can be okay if you're on the bird side. But if you want to balance the success of the caterpillars on which the success of the birds still depends, you can't have only the ones that make the caterpillars either not eat it at all and not be present, or easy targets so that they don't reproduce into adults that then make more caterpillars. So this is how we have to think about each cultivar individually. What does it do? What is different about it? What are the trade-offs to it? Some cultivars are great. Some cultivars make more berries than the straight species or more flowers. Some of them are just cosmetically different, but ecologically they reproduce in the same way. And then some of them, like Annabelle, are biologically inert in ecologically. So we just have to understand that about cultivars when we make our decisions. And then the last thing to consider is hybrids. So hybrids are plant species that have been bred between two different species. That does happen. It happens in nature on its own, especially among maples. Maples are notoriously, wrong button. Maples are notoriously promiscuous. So this is a cultivar called Autumn Blaze of the Freeman maple. That's a cross between red maple and sugar maple. It's beautiful. It grows fast because of a dynamic called hybrid vigor, where a hybrid species, often the individual will be faster, bigger, faster, stronger, more colorful. The problem with Freeman maples is they grow too fast. So often a Freeman maple and its related cultivars will get big fast, but not very strong. So each year's growth is what sets on the tree rings. Then those layers of tree rings is where the wood gets its strength. So a 10-year-old tree that's the same size as a 25-year-old tree is much weaker than that 25-year-old tree. So the Freeman maples tend to have quite a bit of wind breakage in their sort of adolescence and teenage years. So they're beautiful. And so this was naturally occurring or a selected hybrid. And then they picked one that had the best fall color and propagated that one clonally. So if you see an Autumn Blaze maple, and there are a ton of them out there, every one of them is the same genetic individual. So if a disease or a pest that really affects Autumn Blaze maples specifically comes around, we're going to lose a lot of city street trees because they are all functionally identical and they will all be exactly as vulnerable. So that lack of diversity is another thing to consider in both cultivars and hybrids. Generally, they also are not fertile. So if you're trying to restore a woodland or something, the seeds of the Autumn Blaze maple don't make more maples. A good example of a naturally occurring hybrid is this. This is the Dixie wood fern. So it is a hybrid fern that just occurs in nature and then has been selected and grown on in the nursery trade because it's big and cool. But this just happens in the woods. Now there are less and less rich, moist woods with both kinds of ferns for that to happen, but we can make that happen with science. So there's nothing wrong with that. Those are both native. Similarly, the Autumn Brilliance serviceberry. That is a naturally occurring hybrid between two different serviceberry species. Among those hybrids, one was selected with really good fall color. They called that Autumn Brilliance, and they sold a ton of them. There's nothing really wrong with them, but they have the similar clonal homogeneity to them. So if we planted only Autumn Brilliance, that would be sort of limiting. But it works. It works great. It makes berries. The berries are fine. The birds love them. Fall colors, wonderful. So there's nothing really wrong with it. We just need to understand that the hybrid is an option. So sometimes, I should say, usually there's an X in the species name to indicate that it's a hybrid. So it's not going to be literally the full name of the one and then an X and then the full name of the other. Usually it's, the genus name, Amelanchier, X, and then some other term that is for the hybrid. That's not always the case. There are a lot of hybrids out there where they just leave the X out. It's kind of hard unless you're really a plant nerd to get into the research and figure out, like, is this a hybrid or not? But These three are all hybrids of two native species with each other. Agastache Blue Fortune is actually a hybrid between a North American species and a European species. So the thing that is different about it, among others, is that it is sterile. The seeds are sterile. Still makes nectar, just doesn't make viable seed. The reason this is actually an advantage is because the straight species, Agastache funiculum, is incredibly prolific by seed. So if you put one of them in a garden, even a large garden, you'll get many, 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 many seedlings year after year. So this one includes the genetics of a non-native species, but because it's sterile, those genetics are not entering the local ecosystem. So it's not spreading beyond the garden in a way that some introduced or invasive species do. And if you plant one of these, you will see tons and tons of pollinators of various different species all over it. So it's still providing a lot of the good services we ask of our pollinator plants, and it's not able to enter the ecosystem and add those non-native genetics into the local gene pool. So it's an example of, yes, this is a hybrid with non-natives, but no is not harmful. You just have to understand, what does it do? That's, not just how does it look, but what does it do? So I think that's all the basic, oh, yeah. Nope, that's backwards. Down is forward. It's really messing with me. So that's the what, which is all the broad terms that you'll see bandied around. Hopefully we all can understand now when someone says, oh, this is, oh, I'll go back 1, 2. Sometimes people say nativar just to indicate this is a cultivar of a native species. I don't really like that. I just say cultivar, and then you should know that the species is native or not, or find out. But to say that it is a nativar, I think, is an attempt to soothe people's fears that the native, the cultivar might be bad. So, oh, well, this is a nativar. It's okay. It's not a super common term, but I just had to include it, and I forgot to mention it. So, where? Is this plant native to where I live? That's a good question, and it depends on how finally you want to slice that question. So is it native to the North American continent? Well, there's lots of stuff that's native to California that's not really native to here, but planting such a thing is a different level of introduced than planting something from Japan. It's just quite different. The odds that it would have gotten on its own from California to here, very, very low, but quite different. So there are some resources here for determining, is a given plant native? If you're interested in a plant, or someone gives you a plant and you want to know, is this thing native? USDA.gov has resources. BONAP, that's the Biota of North American plants. Biota of North America Project, that's what the P is. Wildflower.org, that's the Lady Bird Johnson Foundation. And then this QRC code, which is also on your handouts, has some lists provided by ODNR of native plants appropriate to given ecotypes, wet woods, wetlands, dry fields, that sort of thing. So on the USDA website, you will find maps like this. So this is the red buckeye, Aesculus pavia, one of my favorite trees. It's beautiful. Small understory tree, native to wet woods, beautiful flowers. They're flowering right now. Mine's looking great. If you go to the entry for this plant, on the USDA website, it will take you to this map showing that, yes, this tree is native to all of these states. But then you zoom in a little bit, and you see that they actually only have data for its native status in Hardin County. I don't know why. I don't know what about Hardin County is special. It might just be that that's where a big old one was recorded, so it's such that they could say, okay, this was here prior to settlement, so that means it must have been here. There may well have been many more red buckeyes that were plowed under and not documented, but that means technically it is native to Ohio. There probably are a bunch that are in here and were in here, and it's perfectly appropriate for it. But if you feel the need to get quite so granular with your is it native to my county, you may run into this problem, which is a data collection problem, not a species distribution problem. So don't get stuck on the data. Think more about, is it native to the continent? Is it native to the broader bioregion of the Midwest? And is it appropriate for my site conditions? Do you have moist woods? Do you have stream bank, thickets, rocky hillsides, places like that? It's a great understory tree. Underused, and the non-native horse chestnut is overplanted. Also beautiful, but there's just too many of them, and they don't integrate with the ecosystem in the same way that the red buckeye does. So, more on that same vein, plants are not interested in human political boundaries. So county level, state level, that doesn't matter. The Mississippi River, that matters. If you're a tree and you have to cross the Mississippi River, that can be tough. A lot of them didn't. Similarly, so geography, mountains and rivers, a lot of trees live only in the Appalachians, not because they couldn't live outside of there, but because they just couldn't get up and over the mountains. Likewise, trees like the sweet gum survived in the Appalachians because the glaciers couldn't get up and over the mountains and scour them off. So the Appalachians is one of our biodiversity reservoirs specifically because it was immune to glaciation. So those are the things that constrain a plant's range: geography, geology. Columbus sort of goes right down the borderline between limestone bedrock and sandstone bedrock. Bedrock is what forms soil. So the soil that forms on top of limestone is going to be alkaline. The soil that forms on top of sandstone is going to be more neutral. I'm from West Virginia, where the bedrock is granite. The soil that forms on top of granite is going to be acidic. So the plants that grow well are often, or always, tied to the nature of the soil chemistry for the place where they evolved. So in that, we'll get to that in a little bit actually. So hydrology, is it sandy soil up by the lake? Is it heavy clay soil in a river bottom area? Is it rocky? Is it high and dry? Is it low and wet? Climate, does it flood sometimes or always? In Bexley, we know sometimes. Is there fire periodically that affects the species distribution? And then animal influences, are there creatures moving these seeds around? There are some species that it is believed were reliant on species that are no longer alive. The Osage orange and the Kentucky coffee tree, they relied on the mastodon to move their seeds around. No more mastodons. They still get around, but not like they used to. So when you're thinking about, is this native here? Was this native here in the past? Remember that the modern landscape is so different from the landscape that these plants evolved in, that trying to slice that as, well, would this have been in my county? Was it recorded? Like, the conditions that we have are just very different. You can't stick to only, was a survivor found when they started bothering to check? So think more about, was it around in the region? Will it grow in the conditions that I have? Plant plants that are suitable to the conditions that you have. The constructed landscape gives us an opportunity to create novel plant communities where plants that would not have normally met each other in nature, we can assemble them together and have these new interactions that they wouldn't have benefited from and the wildlife wouldn't have benefited from. It's not as likely that a hummingbird could go to, 7 plants in one person's garden in the same field. That just is not usually how species distribution shakes out. So we can lean into that advantage to create an extra diverse, extra rich landscape in a place that has been degraded relative to its original state. So just don't get hung up on data. When is the best time to plant natives? The old saying is, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time? Now. So the right time to start using natives is 20 years ago or now. But then just more broadly thinking about time, staggering the bloom times of the plants that you have in your garden is a way to provide for pollinators throughout the year, especially seasonally migrating pollinators. So there are a lot of insects that move through in a given time period, and if the plant that they like isn't there at that time, then they're kind of out of luck. And if your garden has a bunch of flowers in the spring, and then it really peters off in the summer, and then you get some stuff in the fall, you can look at, okay, what are the native plants that flower in the summer that I can add to fill that gap in time so that my garden isn't, a slow spot for wildlife in the summer. So examples of sort of time niche plants are the spring ephemerals, so Virginia bluebells and the wood poppy. They come up early before the trees have canopied out. They're taking advantage of sunlight that is only there for a little bit in the spring. They do their thing, and then they go dormant through the summer, and you don't see them again until next year. So if you don't have those, and often places that should have them don't have them because of things like winter creeper, that's a niche in time that you can fill with these spring ephemerals, and then something else might be growing right next to it, hasn't emerged yet, and you get a tag team effect where as one fades out, a new one comes in. The asters, they're really the dominant fall, so much of home gardening is geared towards spring and summer. Fall flowers are the aster family, so that's asters like this, but also the goldenrods. So not neglecting your fall flowering things is really important, especially for the insects and birds that are going to be leaving when it gets cold. So they need to fuel up, because some birds and insects will fly nonstop for days and days and days. And if there aren't enough flowers with high energy nectar for them to fuel that journey, they might not make it. And then even the winter is a time that we need to support our pollinators. So a lot of plants keep their seeds on them through the winter, and birds will come and eat those seeds in the winter when nothing else is actively new and there aren't caterpillars around. So if you cut back all your perennials at the end of the season so that it looks tidy through the winter, you've just destroyed the winter food store of things like this echinacea, which actually can be quite a feature in the winter garden, and you will find that birds will come through and pick those over during the winter. Similarly, winterberry holly, they keep their berries up through the winter. They're beautiful for us, and then you'll notice sometime around February, they start to disappear, sometimes even in a single day. I had one mockingbird come and eat every single one of the berries out of my garden one winter. It chased off all the other birds, and but they were there for it when it needed them. So keeping in mind the full season, if all you have is boxwoods and hydrangeas, that's nothing going on in the winter. So you have to make sure that the diversity of what you plant supports the diverse needs of wildlife throughout the year. Okay, now we get to why. Why are native plants important? So we're going to touch on 3 areas. The host plants for Lepidoptera, that's butterflies and moth. The specialist insects that are not butterflies and moths, and their adaptations to local conditions. This is just a rain garden because I needed a picture. I wanted to have a picture on every slide. So, Lepidoptera host plants. Here are just a few examples. So they go from the very specific, this is the Carner blue butterfly. It is only able to host its caterpillars on this lupine. And because of that, it is quite endangered. So if you plant lupines, you are almost certainly not going to get a Carner's blue because there are just so few of them. But there are so few of them because so much of the wet lowland areas that lupines would have grown have been converted into corn and soybeans. So it's not that you shouldn't plant lupines and hope, but I think that they're confined to a quite small region. They're threatened, but they are a poster child for the kinds of problems you can get into when the limited plant host resources become even more limited. So everyone knows about monarchs. They're a big celebrity butterfly. They host on the milkweeds. They're actually making a great comeback because of lots of efforts of people just like you. But there are a lot of other specialist insects. So here on the bottom left, this is the giant swallowtail, largest butterfly in North America. It hosts in this region on the hop tree, and then one other called the prickly ash, which nobody wants to plant because it's prickly. They host on citrus family trees, so there's a lot more down south, but in Ohio, you pretty much got hop tree and prickly ash, but they're just a magical butterfly to see. They're enormous, so if you plant a hop tree, it is likely that you will get giant swallowtail butterflies and their attendant caterpillars, which disguise themselves as bird poop. Isn't that amazing? This is the spicebush swallowtail on the far side. It grows, as you might expect, on spicebush, but also a variety of other species, sassafras and a few others. And its caterpillar is a literal Pokemon. They modeled the Pokemon after that caterpillar. And then this last one, this is the pipevine swallowtail, beautiful butterfly and an extremely metal caterpillar. This is actually from my garden. I'm proud of that one. This is the only one I didn't have to put an attribution on because those are our caterpillars. We grew those caterpillars. So they're really great. And if you don't have one of the 2 pipevine species around here, you're just never going to get those caterpillars. You might see the butterfly, but if you have the plant, you will definitely get the butterfly eventually. They will find you. So, yeah. Quite a few hop trees, yes. I hope to see enormous giant swallowtails fluttering around Bexley all next year. Hopefully next year, because right now they're little, so if the caterpillars would eat them down. So the host plants is an important role that natives play. There are also non-butterfly specialist insects. So Over here on the far right, this is the spring beauty bee. It is a specialist bee. It only eats the nectar and pollen of just one flower, the spring beauty, which is also a spring ephemeral. It pops up in people's lawns in the spring and then it goes away. Same for the bee. Pops up in the spring and then it's dormant in the soil for the rest of the season. You see them only in the spring. They have pink pollen. Isn't that adorable? Pink pollen sacs on them because of the pink pollen of that flower. No spring beauties, no spring beauty bees. It's just that simple. And often they used to be much more dominant, and then chemical lawn treatments have reduced the amount of spring beauties that occur in lawns because they're a broadleaf plant. So the herbicides that keep lawns all lawny have gotten rid of a lot of spring beauties, so they're not doing great. Over here on the far right, this is the 9-bark calligraphy beetle. It grows on that 9-bark. Now that one actually might be kind of camouflaged on the darker colored foliage 9-bark. But it's just an exquisitely beautiful beetle that no 9-barks, no beetle. There's just another one of the specialist relationships. And then these are some pictures from Joe Boggs of oak galls. So each one of these is growth from the plant that is encapsulating the egg of a wasp. The wasp injects a chemical into the oak tree, lays an egg on it, and the oak grows a little thing to protect that wasp. So if that wasp doesn't have oak trees to reproduce on, you will not have that wasp. That wasp, well, not these wasps specifically, but many wasps that do this are predators of other pest insects. So if you lose your predators, you get things that are the prey that then have knock-on effects. The deer problem that we have is to a large extent because of a lack of predators. That same dynamic can happen in the insect world. And interestingly, there are parasites of the gall wasps that depend on the gall wasps. So the wasp makes this little gall on an oak tree, leaves its egg. Another thing comes along and lays its eggs on the eggs in the gall. So sometimes it's parasites all the way down in nature, but we need each one of those species. They all belong here and have been here longer than we have been here. Humans are an introduced species in North America, only about 12,000 to 20,000 years ago. So all these species that you see have been here much longer than that. And why are native plants important? This is a big one. I'm sure you're all already on board with this, but just some of the reasons that local plants are important is that they're adapted to the conditions that we have. They're from here. They've been doing it for a long time. They know what to do. So if you select one that is appropriate for the conditions that you have in the region that you have, it knows what to do. So depending on the conditions that you have, common yarrow can grow in poor, nutrient-poor, dry, rocky soil. This is literally growing out of a crack in 3 rocks. Seems perfectly happy. It's making flowers. It'll make seeds. It'll do its life cycle. If you have heavy shade under big trees and people say, oh, I have so much shade, I just can't grow anything. There's tons of stuff you can grow. And one of those things is wild ginger that needs that shade. And it will not grow in a field and it will not grow on a roadside ditch. It needs the shade of trees. This is a really fun plant called fragrant ladies' tresses. It grows in bogs and fens. This is Bexley. Does anyone have a bog? Probably sometimes, some part of the year. But if you have persistently wet soil, you can have a native Ohio orchid. There are actually more than one, but this is my favorite. And it just needs a consistently wet kind of soil. And there are lots of things that can't grow in soil that's wet all the time. This is one of the things that can. And then just at the bottom, this is one of our 5 native rhododendrons. I said earlier I'm from West Virginia. I really like rhododendrons. And the place I live in Ohio, I just can't grow them. It's too alkaline. They're adapted to acidic soils. So these are native to Ohio, but they're native to little pockets of Ohio. Southeast Ohio where the Appalachians come around and it's still acidic. Maybe a few other places where there's acidic soil pockets. So this comes back to, ooh, where is it native? Yes, Ohio. No, not all of Ohio. Some places in the cities, some people probably grow really nice azaleas and rhododendrons. You are lucky. You have a little bit of acidic soil. Great. I'm jealous. Give me some of your soil. And then how can I use native plants in my landscape? The best way to start is remove and replace. So identify the things in your landscape that are problematic and remove them and put them in something that is beneficial. That's what we've been doing with the Bexley Habitat Triangle. In addition to various honeysuckles and other species, we also had some people who removed their calorie pears and their burning bushes and things like that, and we're replacing them with natives that will do a similar thing that the invasive or non-native species was doing. So for example, replacements for burning, wrong button. Replacements for burning bush. This is red twig dogwood, and this is winterberry holly. About the same size category. They're both pretty tough. They're both pretty. They both have good fall color. They're both, have a winter interest. They do the thing that we usually ask burning bush to do, and they don't do the bad things that we don't want burning bush to do. Similarly, replacements for European barberry. This is a small shrub New Jersey tea, and this is another small shrubby cinquefoil. Same size category as those little purple barberries. None of the negative side effects. And lastly, a replacement for the winter creeper euonymus. It's not evergreen, but it's pretty close. This is a cultivar of fragrant sumac called Growlow. Only gets about this big, really tough, great for parking lots and really difficult sites. Will fill an area over time as it sort of knits together. Only gets so big, beautiful fall color, none of the problems. So there are options out there to replace the thing that is done by the landscape industry with a non-native invasive. And this is also in your handout, but this is a list to the Ohio Invasive Species Council's suggested replacements for, okay, do you have this, plant that. Do you have this, plant that. And then another way you can use native plants is to fill the empty niches that you find. Oh, I cut off one of the words. So one of the things about a garden is that empty soil attracts weeds. Nature will fill an empty space with something, and it might not be something that you want. The reason that the invasive species we have are such a problem is because they've filled a lot of empty spaces. We bulldoze the ground to lay a highway through, and the wasteland on either side fills with something, and it filled with honeysuckle in this area. So plants that set seed prolifically will fill those empty spaces for you. And 4 of my favorites are wild columbine, great for shade; lyre-leaf sage, great ground cover; golden alexanders, great for pretty much any kind of site, also a great butterfly host; black swallowtails, a lot of people's gateway butterfly. And then the penstemons, this particular one is foxglove beard tongue, but there's a bunch of them. All of these, if you put in a few plants, they will set seed, and that seed will pop up only where there is bare soil because the seeds need light to germinate. So they're not going to suddenly swamp your big mature plants, but they're going to pop up in areas where they are not fully mature or where plants have not knit together. So the sea of mulch in between shrubs can become a sea of plants. The leaves of those plants then block sunlight from germinating weed seeds. And over time, if you fill an area with good plants, there'll be less and less opportunity for the problematic plants to pop up in your landscape. So just something to think about, how to get the plants to do that work for you. It just takes time. And then just a few other methodologies, I guess, for being more ecological with your landscape. Just reevaluate your expectations. An immaculate landscape is a sterile landscape. So if you want an ecologically rich landscape, you may have to accept a difference in perception of how you think the landscape ought to look. It doesn't mean it has to be ugly. It doesn't mean it has to be wild and uncontrolled, but it probably will have to be different. So some sayings, we say leave the leaves. A lot of insects overwinter in the leaf litter underneath trees. If you haul all the leaves away to the curb and the city sucks them up and grinds them up, well, you've just ground up all those beneficial insects that were overwintering in that space. So wherever possible, leave the leaves that you already have to preserve the life cycle of those creatures. Also, soft landings. Normally under a big tree will be many years worth of leaves. Lots of creatures that eat the leaves of those trees reach maturity and then fall from that tree to the ground. If they fall to hard-packed turf lawn earth, it hurts. If they fall on a nice soft leaf litter or a fluffy sedge, doesn't hurt, and they'll be able to dig themselves into the ground and overwinter and complete their life cycle. Watering deeply but infrequently. The sprinkler system is something that grows weak, shallow roots because you're applying a lot of water just to the surface. So in your landscape, when you water something, watering it a lot, but not watering very often, will soak the water deeply and encourage the roots to go chase that water. If you water a little bit all the time, the roots are encouraged to just capture that surface water. That is how you grow tough plants. Mowing your lawn high and potentially only mowing the parts of the lawn that you use. So mowing a path through a lawn is a great way to start adding at least a little bit of wildlife benefit to the very small creatures that might live in a lawn. And you might get some surprises in there. It might be dandelions, but it might be spring beauties. So not scalping your lawn down to a putting green unless you're going to putt on it is a great way to sort of enhance the wildlife value of the landscape that you already have. And I already talked about it, but planting densely, nature will fill empty space. This is a picture from Lurie Garden in Chicago, and not a lot of empty space there. Also no weeds. They have professional gardeners, but they're busy doing other stuff. They don't have time to be weeding. The weeding is taken care of by the plants. The competition among the desirable plants is the thing that suppresses most of the weed pressure you might get in a sea of mulch conventional garden. And as the last slide, these are just some resources. All this stuff is on your handout, so take a picture of it if you want, but you also have got handouts. These are all just great lists. If you're thinking, okay, I'm really into native bees, which one of the plants are best for mason bees? This will tell you. These are just great resources for substitution and for finding out more about different wildlife species. So with that, questions? Any questions?
Correction, golden Alexanders are named after Alexander the Great. He picked them they came from Eurasia. You can look it up.
I will look that up. That is news to me.
How do you do this to a degree that might be necessary and beneficial when you have vegetable garden?
So for the question was, I guess you held it. It was about if you're vegetable gardening, how can you still be beneficial? So there's usually a perimeter around the vegetable garden. There's an area that is sort of the path area. If you've got raised beds where the path meets the raised bed, there are a lot of small plants you could plant along that interface. Or if you're just planting the perimeter of your property. So if the center of your property where you get the full sun is where you have your vegetables, the perimeter of your property, the fence line, what have you, is a great place that if you're not growing something for food, you can grow something for pollinators, and you'll get better pollination of your vegetables the more pollinators are around. Also, a lot of the native flowering plants, the nectar supports the adults of various predatory wasps, and those predatory wasps prey on garden pests like the tomato hornworm. So you get the assistance of natural predators in containing the predators of your plants. So you think about your perimeters, think about even just one island of something that, yes, 95% of it is food garden, and then 5% is your pollinator buffet, and that can be enough.
On that note, any recommendations for like a ground cover that could be used as a living mulch amongst a vegetable garden?
A lot of the vegetables that we grow are tall enough that there's an annual plant called partridge pea that is a nitrogen fixer. It comes up easily from seed. The seed is cheap. And whenever it does get big, it only wants to get about this big. If it ever gets too big that it's swamping a plant and competing for light, you can just pluck some of it and throw it right on the ground. It'll break down as a natural fertilizer. So partridge pea is a good example. The Salvia lyrata, that's one where the foliage is just a basal rosette. It's only about this tall. Flowers come up here, but the space in between tomato plants is a perfectly good place for lyre-leaf sage. A lot of the smaller plants like that would work well and not compete in a way that is detrimental to your vegetables. And then I guess a lot of if it's short and it's shallowly rooted, so columbines are also pretty shallowly rooted. They're pretty short, so they can cover the soil in between bigger plants and be sort of shouldered out of the way, like it's not going to win against a cabbage. So, a lot of the smaller self-seeding plants will fill in, and then you're always free to just cut them back if they need elbow room as the bigger plants grow. But always better to have something growing than nothing in between your vegetables. But yeah, I would go with partridge pea.
That was an amazing question to answer.
I was curious about your opinion of shredded pine bark as a mulch around your natives, or should you try to leave it bare ground?
So shredded pine bark is pretty, and it doesn't break down very fast, which is an advantage when you have to pay what pine bark costs to put it around plants. But because it doesn't break down very fast, it is not adding nutrients to the soil in the way that a more easily degraded leaf compost bark to become dirt. So the bigger chunks, they stay around for a long time. Now, in general, over a long period of time, they will break down, and I am told, though I don't know the science on it, that they add a little bit of acidity to the soil, which a lot of garden plants like, not necessarily all native plants, but because they're sitting on top of the soil, not breaking down, they're not adding any new nutrients to the soil. So it's a trade-off. It's good visually, but it's perhaps less good ecologically, nutritionally for the plants. So if you're going to do pine bark, especially on a new area, I would put down a leaf compost first and then cover that with pine bark so that you get both. You get some nutrition that'll wash down into the soil from the nutritious mulch, and then you'll get the weed suppression and the aesthetics from the pine bark mulch.
I've seen this triple shredded. That's probably better, right? The triple shredded.
So
it
triple
probably-
shredded, that refers to how many times it goes through the shredder. So smaller pieces. Triple shredded goes on smooth. What can happen, especially with triple shredded black mulch that a lot of people see, is that it sort of sticks together into a mat that will shed water. So the chunkier double process is my favorite because the space in between those bigger chunks of wood is the space that little insects and things can move through. It's harder to move through a more densely packed layer of fibers from the triple shredded. So if we're talking about pine bark, smaller pieces break down faster than bigger pieces. But just in a general way, I prefer personally a chunkier mulch from shredded hardwood so that things can move more easily through them, so that air and water can move more easily through them. But it does go on really smooth. The triple process goes on smooth. What you want to make sure you're not doing is applying it enough that it has created a mat that when you look at it, it's like hard, and if you dig in it, a piece comes off like in a plate. There shouldn't be, mulch should always be crumbly, even old mulch. If it comes up in a chunk, that's too much. So it's not bad, but just use it correctly. I hope that answered your question.
Any other examples of ground cover rather than using mulch?
I mean, there are tons of ground cover plants that are not coming to mind right now, but there are lots of low-growing, spreading plants. So the penstemon that I showed, it's another one that most of the year, it's just basal foliage about this tall. And then in the spring, the flowers come up to about here, but the rest of the time, it's just a foliage plant. So in between other larger plants, it can tolerate the shade that those larger plants provide and act as a living mulch. In a shadier area, moss is a great living mulch. If you get moss growing on its own, just let it grow because it's a better mulch than you're going to buy. And a lot of times moss becomes a seed germination bed for good things that are co-evolved with that moss. But look for shade-tolerant natives, and those will be better often as a ground cover mulch in between other bigger things because the shade of those other things won't affect them. But I mean, the lyre-leaf sage can take full sun, and there are a lot of others that I'm not coming to mind right now, but they're around.
The one that you did at my yard with the white cross.
Sedum ternatum.
There
There's a great low-growing. It's a shady succulent, Sedum ternatum. It's our native sedum. It's great for shade. Sedum is wild stone crop. Sedum ternatum. It's a shade-tolerant ground cover, and it'll just grow into a mat. And then when you want it somewhere else, you just pick up some of it and you put it somewhere else, and it grows there because it's shallowly rooted. It's really great around the base of mature trees. So an area where you might want to put a mulch ring around a tree, over time you can get a ring of living Sedum ternatum around that. Ternatum, Sedum ternatum. One of my favorites. I have a lot of favorites.
I don't know if this question for Rebecca or whoever. Can we visit the triangle? How is that available for public viewing? Or?
Oh, we would love to have you visit the triangle. In fact, it would be great if you came and you volunteered. As we develop this, the triangle, you would be able to work directly with our speaker today and learn on site.
But just to add to that, it is private residence yards for the most part. It is
But if you
people's
volunteer,
backyards.
you're open to it, and we'll have walks.
So it's in people's front yards, backyards?
Both front and back. A majority of it is the backyards because we selected the triangle for a set of properties that backed up to each other without an alley in between. So the interface between everyone's backyards is that conduit for birds, butterflies, and bees. But a lot of the effort went into people's backyards. So it's not like a public park. Well, some of them you can. Some of them you can. I mean, some of the properties have really deep backyards, so you can see it way over there. And some of them it's more obvious. But some people have fences. But everyone I've interacted with in the triangle has been lovely people. So you make friends with them, and then you can see their backyards a lot. Yeah, Susan's a great ambassador for that.
Thank you so much for the presentation tonight. Appreciate it.